Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 045. I am your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan, Dan the man. If you can't do it, nobody can. And this is the world's first podcast, also known as Internet Radio Show, fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, romance, and generally good time that can be had with wooden boats. Welcome to episode 45 today, folks. Good to have you with me on the show. If this is your first time, I hope you enjoy it a lot. And for all my returning listeners, thanks for tuning in one more time. Hopefully there'll be many more times to come. This is episode 45, and I have done this podcast every Thursday since last October, and I plan on doing it for at least the next 50 years, which would make me 108 years old. Maybe I won't make it that far, but I plan on doing it for a long time, and looking forward to getting episode 100 under my belt about a year from now, so that'll be pretty fun. Well, today's featured segment is or are. My grammar sometimes, I never know whether to say is or are. But basically there's two interviews that I'm going to play today that I did at the Maritime Heritage Festival in St. Helens, Oregon 8 days ago. 8 days, 6 hours, and 27 minutes and 12 seconds to be exact. First one is with Cy Miller. And I ran into Cy there. He's got a 1965 Century Runabout, a wooden boat that's absolutely beautiful that he bought it brand new in 65. And year or two ago, he put 50 coats of varnish on it. I mean, this is a serious rig. So stick around. That's really a fun interview with Cy. And then I did an interview with Bill Weaver aboard the PT658 boat, which is a patrol torpedo boat from World War II. It's a 78-foot-long wooden vessel. It was delivered to the Navy in 1945, and it's the only living wooden PT boat that's been restored to original condition and is in the water and fully operational. So stick around for those two interviews. I think you'll have a lot of fun with that. Please connect with me. Email dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. You can subscribe to my e-news list. You can give me comments on my blog. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest if you look for Wooden Boat Dan. And my voicemail feedback hotline, 424-261-2360. 424-261-2360. You can also subscribe to my podcast in the iTunes podcast section of the iTunes store. So please do that if you get a chance. And actually, I've got some listener feedback that I want to play for you here. So I'm going to pause the tape for just a moment and find that. I am back, and this is an email I got from my friend Lee Bjorklund, who runs the Dragon Boat program in the Seattle area. And he says here, Dan, I ran across some things that you might find of interest. Here's an item from a book I just read that puts sailing nicely into perspective. And the book is Life is Like a Sailboat, Selected Writings on Life and Living from the Philadelphia Inquirer by John Grogan, page 46. Over the weekend, I sat my son down and gave him the talk. No, not the birds and the bees, not the riot act on drinking and driving, not drugs or sex. This was the life is like a sailboat talk. The occasion was the arrival of his report card. It has its high points, but its share of disappointments too. My son needed to reorder his priorities. You know, I began, life is like sailing a boat. My father had given me the same talk one summer evening about 35 years ago as we skimmed along in the family dinghy on a quiet lake, the sails catching the gold of the sunset. We were sailing along in silence when abruptly he began. Life is like a sailing boat, he had told me, his hand on the tiller. Small continual adjustments at the helm are needed to stay on course and eventually get where you need to go. A good sailor, he pointed out, picks a clear destination on the far shore and sticks to it. No matter what the weather kicks up, what obstacles and detours arise, he doesn't lose sight of his goal. A good sailor watches for submerged rocks and other hazards along the way, giving them wide berth, he said. Blowing off course is one thing, running aground is quite another. One is easily corrected, the other almost always irreversible. A good sailor, Dad said, anticipates the winds of change before they strike. He watches for storm clouds and knows when to seek shelter and when to ride them out. My father was not the most expansive man, and as suddenly as he had begun, he was done. A primer for life's complex journey summed up in a handful of basic sailing rules. I was 13 and adrift myself, floating directionless in the sea of adolescence. Very cool. I really like that, Lee. Thanks for sending that. I like the life is like your tiller. You got to continually make small adjustments. If you get blown off course, you can get back on course. But if you run aground, that can get a little nasty. Anyway, thanks for sending that over, Lee. Really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on here to, let's see, my canoe. Well, folks, I didn't get a whole lot done this week. I've been playing too much. We went camping for a few days in eastern Washington on the Columbia River, and I had my dory with me and had a blast with that. Just cruising around the river with a little 15 kicker on there, and saw some bald eagles and some hawks, and we were actually sitting by the river on Sunday morning, and we watched this hawk circle around, and that guy dive bombed into the water, came up with a fish in his talons. I think hawks have talons, I don't know, or is it claws? Probably talons, and took off down the river, so that was pretty cool. So I had a great time out on the water, but didn't get time in the shop working on the canoe. So let's see, on the canoe though, my next step is to glass the inside 2 panels. So I'm going to work on that this week and keep chipping away at it. I got to get her done before the end of the summer so I can get out on the water. And but it was a good week, and I hope you had a good week on the water also. Upcoming events, the Scamp class, August 6th to 17th. In Port Townsend, Washington, called the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building if you'd like to build a scamp during that class. September 1st to 4th, Small Craft Skills Academy in Port Townsend. Labor Day weekend is the Victoria Classic Boat Show. And the weekend after that is the Port Townsend Wood and Boat Festival, which is always a fun event. And there's a list of other events on my website, and if you would like anything added to that list, shoot it over to me, and if it fits with what I've got there, I'll be glad to add it for you. Well, that's it for announcements and other stuff going on right now. So we're going to move on to the interviews that I did, and we will start with Silas Miller, the interview. It's only about 6 minutes. And then I'll go directly from that interview to the interview with Bill Weaver from the PT boat. And so let's go ahead and crank it. So go ahead and get started, guys. And we'll talk to you soon. Okay, it is July 15th, 2012. I am with Cy Miller. Cy, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you.
We're at the Maritime Heritage Festival in St. Helens, Oregon. And I was walking around looking at the beautiful boats here and taking a picture of a century ski boat, is what I would call it. And Cy came over and said, "Hey, do you like my boat?" So we started up a conversation. Cy, you bought this boat brand new in 1965.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right. At that time, it was called McCuddy's Marina on down in Portland on Columbia River.
Yeah.
On Marine Drive. And it took me a little while to decide, but I've had it now for 47 years.
47 years, yeah. So what's that boat made out of, Cy?
It's mahogany plywood.
Mahogany plywood, yeah.
I don't mean plywood. I mean mahogany wood.
Mahogany planks.
Plank, yeah.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, I took all the varnish and everything off of it and I revarnished it 50 times. And
oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, it took one summer to do it.
Oh, my goodness.
It was 16 quarts of varnish that went on it.
And how many coats?
I did it 50 times, but you sand between each coat a little bit.
Yeah.
So
oh, my.
You take a little bit off when you.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
You know, so
you're one patient guy.
I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah. So what's that boat got for power, Cy?
It's a 327 cubic inch Chevrolet block with gray marine equipment on it.
Okay. Yeah. And how many horsepower is it?
282, I believe, is what the book says.
Okay, 282?
282.
Yeah. So that's a really pretty fast boat, isn't it?
It's got quite a bit of power. I pulled 6 skiers one time with it, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. So have you owned other boats over the years too, Cy?
For a couple of years, I had a fiberglass boat. It was called Anthony, and it was kind of rough riding on the Columbia because of the waves, so I needed something a little heavier. That's why
you bought this boat.
Got rid of it and got this heavier one, a little smoother.
Yeah.
Riding in the water.
So what's the length of this boat?
17 foot.
17 foot. Is there a model number or version name for it?
Resorter.
Resorter, okay.
Century Resorter.
Century Resorter. And where was it made, Cy?
In Michigan.
In Michigan, okay. And the local dealer here was selling them brand new.
That's right.
Yeah, and how much did you pay for it new?
If I remember, it was a little over $5,000 for the boat, and then, of course, I bought the trailer, which was around $300.
$300 for the trailer, yeah.
And it's I can't hardly imagine that anymore, the price of the boats now.
Yeah, right. So you probably got a lot of good memories in that boat, huh?
I do.
You mainly use it on the Columbia River?
I've had it at Estacada, I had it on Willamette, Columbia, and a few other places in the area. Mostly on the Columbia, probably. But younger days, my wife would drive the boat. We had 2 young children, and they would be in the boat doing whatever, playing, and I would be on the water ski for usually on weekends.
Oh, really?
When we was younger, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hours on the boat pulling me as a skier, but it was taken care of real good, so that's why it looks so nice.
Yeah, very cool. So are you part of a wooden boat association or club or something?
The Columbia Willamette Club, Antique Classic Boat Club.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. How long have you been in that, Cy?
Since '93, I believe.
I see. Okay. Very cool. So any boats at the show this year that you particularly like besides your own?
Oh, those yachts down below, they really look nice.
Yeah. There's some big Chris Crafts down there, isn't there? Stuff.
But Dave Jerome, that restores boats, has a couple of them here. Those other 2 are his that he's restored for other fellas, and he does a great job. He showed me how to put the varnish on on my boat, and that's
really?
the only reason it turned out like it did, because if I had a problem, I did it in the garage, and if I had a problem, I'd hook onto it, take it over to his shop, and he'd showed me how to solve my problem, take it back and go to work on it again. But usually, I think it was about 3 months this summer, probably 5-6 years ago. I'd work during the day, and every evening I'd come home, I would do a little sanding on it and re-put another coat on it. I did that 50 times, I think, in about 3 months.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Si. One patient guy.
Well, it was fun. If I didn't enjoy it, certainly I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, right.
So now mainly I just take it around to a show wherever I can and enjoy people enjoying it.
Yeah.
Mainly the grandkids, I take them out when they want to go, and we have fun pulling them on a ski or a tube.
Mm-hmm.
So other than that, it just sits in the garage.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I appreciate your time today, Si. It's nice meeting you. Any parting comments for our listeners today?
Just when you see a boat show, I would advise they're worth going and looking at these old boats. These owners enjoy having people come around, and I know that the people enjoy it just as much looking them over. So it's worth their time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks, Si. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, it is July 15th. I am at the Maritime Heritage Festival, the 4th annual, with Bill Weaver. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So we're on board the PT658, which is a wooden vessel.
Right.
And I just learned this morning that PT stands for Patrol Torpedo.
Correct.
And so, Bill, you've been involved with this vessel for a couple of years. Give me a little background on it, would you?
So the boat is a 78-foot Higgins PT boat, and was built by Higgins Industries in New Orleans and delivered to the Navy in July of 1945. And the boat, well, along with 3 other PT boats, was on a ship headed for Russia under the Lend-Lease program when the war ended. And the ship was redirected back to Bremerton. And this boat wound up, along with 2 others, down in California, still with the Navy, and was used at the Point Mugu Missile Test Range as a range control and crash rescue boat. So these boats, this particular boat was surplused by the Navy in 1958 and then sat as a derelict in the Oakland, California area until about 1992, when a group of PT veterans from Portland, the Portland area, acquired the boat. Portland, Oregon, acquired the boat and spent about 14 years restoring it and getting it back in the water.
Wow.
So a bunch of guys at the time that were in their 70s, and they put tens of thousands of hours into the boat and a lot of money to get it back running again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me about the construction of the hull on this boat. What the species of wood is and how thick and all that.
Sure.
Stuff.
So the boat is the hull's 2 layers of planks, one mahogany, the other spruce, and there's a layer of canvas in between, and then the 2 layers are actually riveted together with copper rivets.
Really?
Right. So the whole hull is spruce and mahogany planks.
A lot of people in between.
Canvas in between, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then riveted together.
Yeah. Wow. So is there just paint over the wood, or is there any kind of glass or?
The hull on this boat is original. Most of the superstructure and the deck has been replaced. So the deck we're standing on is 3/4-inch mahogany plywood with a layer of glass over the top of that, and then a non-skid. And this is a catalyzed paint system that matches the original colors exactly. Mm-hmm. And also the camouflage pattern is entirely original. Wow. But the hull just has paint on it.
Okay. Now, you were saying your dad was involved with this boat when he was...
My dad was a PT crewman, okay. And he passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a crewman on Higgins boats, and he was training on Higgins boats in New Orleans. That's where he met my mother.
Oh.
And my dad was typical of the crewman of that period. He enlisted when he was 17.
Really?
So the average age of the enlisted crew on these boats was about 19 years old. And the average age of the officers was early 20s, 21, 22 years old. Yeah. So, so that's his history. He served in the Philippines on PT boats right at the end of the war.
Okay, so what were the intended use of these boats? For us that don't know a whole lot about wartime history and stuff, how were they used?
Well, so at the beginning of the war, things looked pretty bleak for the country. The Japanese were pretty much overrunning big parts of the world. And there was a urgent effort to get some boats deployed, something that could do some damage or have some impact on the Japanese capital ships. So the idea of these boats was they were torpedo attack boats in the beginning of the war. And they had torpedoes. The idea was they would attack at night, make a run on a ship, launch torpedoes, and then use their speed and maneuverability to get away. Well, they had some success, but the real success of these boats was later in the war, and these boats morphed into very formidable gunboats. And these are the most heavily armed vessels of World War II, pound for pound.
Really?
So later in the war, their primary mission was the interdiction, at least in the Pacific, interdiction of Japanese barges and traffic between the islands. Boats operated almost entirely at night. They did some rescue activities with downed pilots, but their main thing was to engage barges and traffic on the shore, on roads, trucks, that type of thing.
Okay, so they had some type of radar to operate at night. Is that what they did?
Yeah, later in the war, in the beginning of the war, none of the boats had radar. And the story of PT-109 that was run down by a Japanese destroyer, it didn't have any radar. So radar came along, I'm not sure the exact year, but I think in 1943, end of 1942. And at the end of the war, all the boats had radar. And this is the radar mast up here that I'm pointing up to, just above us.
Okay. So that's fine. We can pause for a second here. Okay, so we're back here. So we were talking about radar. So, you want to continue there, Bill?
Sure. So this boat's equipped with an original radar mast, and radar was included in these boats from about the middle of the war on. And it was very effective in terms of locating surface traffic and allowing these boats to operate at night.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Their typical mission was 10 to 12 hours, and they would leave before dusk and be back at their base typically before dawn.
I see. Now, is this a twin-engine boat?
This boat has 3 engines.
3 engines, okay.
3 engines. These are Packard V12 marine engines. They were developed during the 1930s for racing for a guy named Gar Wood.
Oh.
And I think you've heard of Gar Wood. And he was one of the principal people that worked with Packard to develop these engines. And then the war came along. Packard built about 17,000 of these engines during World War II. So this has 3 V12s. They're 2,500 cubic inches each, 1,850 horsepower each, and they're intercooled and supercharged.
Wow, and they're gas engines.
Yeah, they run on aviation gasoline, high-octane F-gas. Yep.
So how many 1,850 horsepower
each engine, right.
So you got over 5,000 horsepower on
Correct.
this thing. So what's the speed on? What's the top speed of this boat?
So the top speed when these boats were new was on the order of 45 knots.
Oh my goodness!
I've been on this boat. I was on the boat in 2007, and I saw 35 knots, which is pretty exciting. Nice rooster tail.
Yeah.
We don't run the boat that hard now. The hull's old.
Yeah.
So we typically won't go faster than 15 or 16 knots.
Mm-hmm. Wow, 45 knot top speed.
Yeah.
And you could probably get through some pretty rough water with this thing at a high speed too, huh?
Yeah, these boats were definitely open ocean boats. They used to take these boats on their own hull from the factory in New Jersey down to Florida, and then down past Cuba and all the way to the Panama Canal, where they put them on ships to go to the Pacific.
Wow.
So they run on their own bottoms all the way down there. They'd also run them all the way up the west coast of the U.S. up to the Aleutians. There were some PTs based in the Aleutians during the war as well. So yeah, they were open ocean capable. They could be a very rough ride, and they were known as very wet boats, particularly the Higgins boats.
Yeah. So, what year was this? This was built in 1945.
Right. This boat was delivered in July of 1945. It's one of the last PT boats built.
Oh, really? When did they start building them, Bill?
Well, they were actually there were a group of PT boats at the Pearl Harbor attack. So So it actually started before the war got underway. And the first Japanese aircraft downed at Pearl Harbor were shot down by PT boats that were moored, and they got on their twin 50s and they shot down a couple of Japanese planes during the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Really?
So it's kind of a first blood situation.
How many gallons of fuel does this boat hold?
Well, in the original configuration, the boats held 3,000 gallons. This particular boat, we've removed the 2 aft fuel tanks, so it's 1,500 gallons. And the boat burns, the way we operate it, about 35 to 40 gallons an hour.
Okay.
During the sea trials for this boat in 1945, they ran it for an hour, full open, and they burned 360 gallons of fuel.
Fuel's a little cheaper
exciting
than
ride. A little cheaper. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we pay close to $6 a gallon for our aviation.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's exciting when you take on 1,000 gallons of fuel.
Yeah. So the engine itself does require that special fuel. Is that the deal?
Right.
For it to run properly or keep
originally
running at all?
during the war, aviation fuel was 130 octane, so it's actually higher octane than the 100 octane that we burn now. We burn 100 low lead, which is the standard aviation gasoline.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Let's spin it back the other way. Here we go.
It's a gorgeous boat.
Thank you.
So tell me how the boat's used today then, what you guys are doing with it.
Well, we're an entirely volunteer organization. Save the PT Boat, Inc. is a nonprofit charity. And our mission is the education and maintaining the heritage of World War II and PT boats in particular. So we the main part of our mission is community outreach, coming to shows like this, talking with people, teaching them about PT boats and teaching them about World War II in general, and honoring the veterans that served on these boats during the war. Mm-hmm. So there are about 3,000 PT veterans still living in the country, and every season we get several of them come out and ride with us on the boat. We give first priority to PT veterans of World War II, and we'll take their families out, 2 to 3 generations of family members with the PT folks. So it's really a special thing for us to do.
Yeah. Was it JFK that was a PT veteran?
Right. JFK was a skipper. He was a skipper on a PT boat, PT 109.
Oh, okay.
And his boat was run down by a Japanese destroyer at night. And the rest of that story's pretty well known. He helped save his crew. But JFK was a PT skipper, and General MacArthur was rescued, at the beginning of World War II from Corregidor by a PT boat.
Really?
As well, yeah. And one of our original PT veterans that helped put this boat together, starting in 1992, was a quartermaster. So he was actually at the helm, and we have a picture of him with General MacArthur standing right next to him on the boat.
Oh, cool.
So pretty neat history.
Yeah. So where's this boat kept now, Bill?
We keep the boat on Swan Island down in Portland, and we're at the Navy and Coast Guard base on Swan Island. We have a boathouse there.
Okay.
So it's kept indoors most of the time.
Yeah. So are there any other boats around? Any old PT boats still alive anywhere?
Well, this is the only PT boat that actually runs on its own original power. There are a couple of hulls out there that have been converted to fishing boats. There's one in San Diego. In fact, the sister ship of this one is in San Diego, and it's a fishing boat. So it has diesels in it, and it doesn't look anything like a PT boat.
I see.
There are 5 or 6 other PT boats in museums around the country.
Oh.
A couple in Massachusetts, a couple in Texas, and one in New Orleans. But this is the only one that's still in the water and still runs on its own power.
Wow, that is just awesome.
Yeah, so it's a real unique piece of history.
Yeah. So how many of these were built, Bill?
The Higgins boats, there were about 200 built in New Orleans, and Elko built about 400 PT boats. The Elko boats were a little bit longer than these, and the configuration was somewhat different, but the thing they had in common was they all had the same armament and the same engines.
I see.
So altogether about 700, so about 200 Higgins, 400 Elko, and then about 100 by other manufacturers.
Okay. What was the first year they were built?
Well, they were actually, in the water. Squadron 1 was at Pearl Harbor, so I don't know exactly, but I would say 39 or 40.
I see, yeah.
When they were actually built.
Yeah.
So they were built for a relatively short period of time. And they were considered to be expendable, property during the war. I mean, they're more like a truck than they were like a major ship. They didn't have names; they just had numbers.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, do you know how much they cost new?
I don't know that answer.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know, but they were built out of wood to take advantage of two things: non-critical materials during the war.
Oh.
And they could go to yacht builders. Higgins was a major yacht builder.
Oh.
And have these boats built.
I see.
And Elko was building small electric-powered boats, skiffs. And, Elko, ELCO, is Electric Boat Company.
Oh, okay.
And later on in life, they were building nuclear submarines. So.
Oh, wow. Very cool. So what else about this boat do I need to know? Any other interesting details I've missed?
Just the basic statistics. It's a little over 78 feet long.
Yeah.
About a 20-foot beam. It's about a 5.5-foot draft. So one of the advantages they had is they could get in very close to shore because of the shallow draft.
Yeah.
And with a wooden hull, they weren't susceptible to magnetic mines.
Mm-hmm.
So they could work close into shore without too much trouble.
Yeah.
The boat weighs a little over 100,000 pounds.
Really?
So, yeah. So that's pretty much the critical statistic.
Yeah, very cool.
Crew size was about 15 or 16 enlisted men and 2 or 3 officers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was there sleeping quarters on board the boat?
Right.
Okay, yeah, for all those guys?
There were sleeping quarters, enough for everybody. But in the Pacific, where it was really hot and really humid all the time, they typically either slept on deck or they slept at a shore base. These boats were down during the daylight hours, back at their base, rearm, refuel, and the crew could get some rest. So what they would do is put a tarp over the deck and sleep on deck, or they would go into tents on the shore.
Oh,
sleep.
really?
Yeah, but there are bunks, but they didn't use them much.
I see. Okay. And it looks like the way this is built with the deck is up high and fully enclosed, or can be. It looks like it was to keep the water out of the hull, basically, right? You could take water over the top and not sink the boat.
Yeah, actually, the deck has got quite a curve to it if you look at it.
Yeah.
And you can. These boats were definitely capable of rough water operation.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So, if somebody wants to find out more about the boat and your organization, what would they do, Bill?
They can go on our website.
Okay.
It's SaveThePTBoatInc.com.
Okay.
Or you can go to YouTube or Google and look us up. Okay. There's quite a few different videos on YouTube of PT658.
Okay.
And anybody can come see the boat and get a detailed tour, below decks tour, any Monday or Thursday down at Swan Island in Portland.
Okay.
So if you go on the website and then give us a call or contact us, we can get you on the base and you can take a tour.
Very cool. Well, thanks a lot for your time today, Bill. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Okay,
thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you very much, Cy, for doing that interview. That was a lot of fun. And I wish you the best with your Century boat. And also, Bill Weaver, thanks for taking the time. That's a really cool PT boat. Wow, top speed of 50 knots or something like that. And that's pretty cool. 3 V12 Packards at 2850 horsepower each. That's unbelievable. So best of luck to you with your venture there, and hope you guys have a great time with the boat. And if you get a chance, to the listeners, to you folks that are listening, get down to Portland sometime and check out that boat. I'll have some links on my website and so on. Well, next week, a couple more interviews. Jeff Saylor from Firehouse Boat Works in Portland. Jeff's done a lot of restorations, repairs, went to school, wooden boat school in Maine, got some really cool stories. And also an interview with Bruce Hebler, who has a gillnet, Columbia River gillnet boat that was built in the 50s that he's restored. Got a lot of fun stories about that boat and some history there. So you won't want to miss next week's show. If you'd like to support the show, You can do so by going to my webpage, clicking on the Resources tab, and there's some Amazon products there. If you click on one of those, that'll take you to Amazon, and if you make any purchase on Amazon of any product, I get paid a small commission. And also on my website on the home page, if you click on the Jamestown Distributors icon in the upper right-hand corner and go to their store and make a purchase, I get paid a little bit. And they have a really cool online marine store, boat building supplies, marine supplies, lots of cool stuff. So if you get a chance, check it out. If you like the show, please leave me a review on iTunes. And let's see, what else here? Oh, it's kind of interesting. My son, Mark, who's 20 years old, asked me yesterday, Dad, if you had to do it over, what would you do in terms of my work? And I had to think about it a minute, but I thought, you know what? I probably would have gone to wooden boat school and built and restored boats. Even though it's not something you get rich at, it's something I think I would thoroughly enjoy. And the course I chose of going into the accounting thing, that's worked out okay. I mean, it's provided a decent income and paid the bills over the years, but not quite as exciting as being in the shop working on the wooden boat. I mean, there's really nothing like that. There's a lot of days I wish, you know what, wish I was getting paid to do this. So, I don't know. I figured with my canoe, maybe when I'm done with this, I'll have $1,600 or $600 into the canoe. And maybe if I'm lucky, I could get $1,600 for it if it really looks awesome. If I were to sell it, which I'm not planning on it. And if I can build it in 80 hours, which I think I can, 80 hours or less, then that would be the equivalent of earning $500 in 40 hours, which is what, $12.50 an hour, something like that. Let's see. Yeah, that's right. $500 for 40 hours. 50 divided by 4, $12.50 an hour. So, that wouldn't quite pay the bills. But, might pay the electric bill, something like that. Anyway, just thinking out loud. So that's it for this week, folks. Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you're enjoying Hooked on Wooden Boats. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. Have a great week.